My mom cut me out of the will because her spiritual advisor told her I was cursed. I know this sounds absolutely insane, but last week I found out my mom cut me out of her will because her new spiritual advisor told her I'm cursed. Let me just say up front that this came out of nowhere. I mean, my relationship with my mom, Linda, wasn't perfect, but it was never on the level of, I think my daughter is literally cursed territory. She's always been a bit eccentric. She dabbled in New Age stuff when I was a kid, read tarot cards for her friends, made us burn sage in the house whenever we had a big argument. But those were just harmless quirks. At least, that's what I thought until everything went off the rails. I guess I should back up and explain how this all started. My mom is in her late 50s now, and since she retired early, she's had a lot of free time. This was supposed to be good. After working nearly her entire adult life, she deserved some relaxation. She traveled a bit, dabbled in pottery classes, and even started volunteering at a local animal rescue. But at some point, maybe a year ago, she got really into these spiritual retreats. I'm talking about week-long energy healing workshops in the mountains with a bunch of people chanting and meditating under the full moon. Again, not my thing, but I figured if it made her happy, why not? Then, about 6 months ago, she started mentioning a guy named Jeremiah. Initially, it was just little comments here and there. Jeremiah says that we should pay attention to signs from the universe. Or, Jeremiah believes there's a higher plane we can access if we stay mindful. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he was just an instructor at one of these retreats. Over time, though, Mom talked about him more and more, and always with this kind of reverence in her voice, like he was some holy figure. I remember asking her once, half-jokingly, "So is Jeremiah your guru now?" And she got really defensive. That was the first red flag. She snapped, "He's not a guru. He's my spiritual advisor, and he sees things clearly. You could learn a lot from him." Things escalated when she invited me to one of his seminars. I agreed mostly out of curiosity. I wanted to see what this guy was about. The seminar was in a hotel conference room with about 30 people sitting on metal folding chairs, listening to Jeremiah talk about purging negativity from our lives. He was tall, thin, with bright blue eyes that seemed to flick around the room, taking in every reaction. He had a kind of hypnotic voice, I'll give him that, but the stuff he said was pretty standard fare. Let go of past traumas, embrace your inner light, blah blah blah. Only, his version had all these extra layers of cosmic warfare, like we needed to guard ourselves against dark energies out there that were constantly trying to latch onto us. They manifest in the people around you, he said. People who carry the seeds of negativity. They can be family members, even your own children. Solve. When he said, even your own children, he locked eyes with me for a second, and I felt this uneasy chill run down my spine. It was such a weird, pointed moment. After the seminar, Mom introduced me to him. Up close, Jeremiah was even more intense. He asked me all these questions. Had I been sick lately? Did I have nightmares? Did I sometimes feel like something was holding me back from reaching my full potential? It felt like a leading script, so I just said, I get headaches sometimes, but that's probably just stress. He smiled in this knowing way and said, headaches can be a sign of spiritual blockages. You might want to explore that. I shrugged it off. A few weeks later, though, Mom started calling me at random hours, telling me she'd had dreams, disturbing ones, where she saw me surrounded by shadows. She was convinced it meant something was wrong with my spiritual alignment. She begged me to let Jeremiah do a one-on-one session with me. I was annoyed, but to humor her, I eventually agreed. So Jeremiah came over to my apartment with all these strange tools, crystals, a bronze bowl, feathers, and a small bottle of some pungent-smelling liquid. He said he was going to cleanse my aura. He had me sit on a cushion in the living room, lights dimmed, while he chanted and waved the feathers around my head. It was bizarre, but I tried to keep an open mind. After maybe half an hour, he paused and said, "You have a strong presence of negativity here. It's not just stress, there's a deeper curse at play." I nearly rolled my eyes. I couldn't believe he actually used the word curse. I wanted to tell him off, but then he gave me this sad look and said, "I'm worried about you. Your mother's worried about you. If we don't address this, it could have terrible consequences." I remember thinking, this is such a scam, but Mom looked so anxious, standing off to the side, biting her lip as though she was witnessing a medical emergency. I just said something vague like, "I'll think about it," hoping that would be the end of it. But it was only the beginning. Over the next few months, Mom became more distant in some ways, yet more persistent in others. She wouldn't visit me unless Jeremiah said it was safe. She refused to come to our usual family dinners unless I agreed to do more cleansing sessions. I started to notice weird changes in her behavior. She stopped wearing the clothes she'd always liked and replaced them with plain white tunics. She had these rituals she had to do at dawn and dusk, bowing to the sun and then to the moon. She drained a good portion of her savings account, paying for energy transformations with Jeremiah. When I tried to ask her about it, she'd get defensive and say, "Money is just an earthly tool. What matters is freeing ourselves from negativity." Oh, the real kicker came when she told me that Jeremiah believed I was the main source of darkness in her life. She said it like she was almost ashamed to admit it, but she firmly believed him. Supposedly, my curse was feeding off her energy, causing her anxiety and preventing her from fully ascending to a higher spiritual plane. It sounded so ridiculous. I remember shouting, "Mom, do you even hear yourself? I'm your daughter. I'm not some evil force feeding off your soul." She got tearful and replied, "I know, honey. I know you don't mean to be. But that's how curses work. They attach to good people without them knowing." From that point on, our interactions turned into constant arguments. She insisted I pay Jeremiah for more sessions. I told her there was no way I'd give that man any of my money. My refusal only confirmed her belief that I was resisting healing. Meanwhile, Jeremiah was quietly convincing Mom to separate from me more and more. "She needs tough love," he told her. "If you enable the negativity, it will swallow both of you." She actually believed him. The shocking moment happened about a week ago. I was going through some old mail at her place. She still gets some of my letters there. And I noticed a sealed envelope from an attorney's office. I know I shouldn't have opened it, but something in my gut told me I needed to see what was inside. And that's how I learned she'd changed her will. The letter was a confirmation of the updated documents, removing me entirely as a beneficiary. My mother, who had always said she wanted to leave her house and any savings to me because I was her only child, had literally disinherited me. I stared at those words in black and white, feeling like someone had punched me in the stomach. I confronted her immediately, storming into her kitchen, waving the letter around. "What is this? Are you serious? You cut me out of your will?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she said, "Jeremiah told me it's for your own good. Money can amplify a curse. If you have access to my assets, it'll only feed the darkness." I was beyond furious. "Mom, he's manipulating you. Why can't you see that? This is so obviously a scam." But she just shook her head and said, "You don't understand the spiritual realm. Jeremiah does. I trust him." It was like a bad dream. The mother who had always been my safe place, who worked overtime to put me through college, who used to bake chocolate chip cookies for me and my friends, was now talking about me as though I were possessed by something evil. I called my best friend, Rebecca, that same day, sobbing into the phone. She didn't know what to say beyond, "This is messed up," which, yeah, was an understatement. I considered going to a lawyer myself, maybe trying to claim Mom was being coerced or that she wasn't of sound mind. But the thought of dragging her through court was heartbreaking. I just wanted her back to normal. Things took an even darker turn when Jeremiah started calling me at odd hours. He'd leave these cryptic voicemails. "I sense your resistance, and it's causing Linda deep pain. If you truly love your mother, you'll leave her alone until you're ready to embrace the cleansing." It gave me chills. It also made me worried that Mom was in some kind of cult-like situation. Desperate, I began to dig for information. I found a few local forums and Facebook groups where people talked about spiritual scams. Sure enough, I stumbled across a post mentioning a healer Jeremiah who had taken thousands of dollars from an older couple, promising to remove a generational curse. When they ran out of money, he ghosted them entirely. The more I read, the more certain I became that he was doing the same thing to Mom, only this time he was driving a wedge between her and me. Probably so no one could talk sense into her. I tried showing Mom these posts. She skimmed them and said, "These people just weren't ready to accept real healing." Jeremiah warned me about false accusations. It was like she had an answer for everything. Over the next few days, I noticed more and more of her stuff disappearing. Expensive jewelry, family heirlooms. Turns out she was selling things to pay for advanced rituals. She wouldn't tell me exactly how much money she'd given him, but it had to be massive. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I told her I was going to talk to a lawyer about declaring her mentally unfit. She lost it, screaming that I was threatening her autonomy, that I was the one who needed psychiatric help. And maybe she was right on some level. I was teetering on the edge of a breakdown myself. I felt so helpless watching her throw away her life for this con artist. The tension between us was off the charts. She even started changing the locks on her doors, telling me it was for spiritual protection. A couple of days later, I got a call from Mr. Thompson, her longtime attorney. He sounded uncomfortable, like he didn't even know how to phrase what he had to say. "Your mother wanted me to inform you that she's taken the step of issuing a formal letter of disinheritance," he said. "She asked me to forward it to you. I'm sorry." I've known your mother for years and I've never seen her like this. That was it for me. I broke down sobbing on the phone, barely hearing his reassurances that I could legally contest it if I felt she was under undue influence. When I next tried to visit her, Jeremiah answered the door. He stood there in his robe, who wears a robe in the middle of the day, and gave me a pitying smile. Linda doesn't want to see you right now. It's too painful for her. He shut the door in my face. I pounded on it, screaming that this was my mother's house, not his, until a neighbor threatened to call the cops. After that, I spent a few days in a numb haze. I kept thinking about how it all spiraled out of control. I'd see pictures on my phone of me and Mom from a year ago, smiling on vacation, or celebrating my birthday, and I'd start crying all over again. Rebecca eventually said, "We can't just let this guy isolate her. We need some kind of intervention." She put me in touch with a local investigative journalist named Kyle, who specialized in uncovering spiritual fraud. Kyle agreed to meet me at a cafe near my apartment. I brought him everything I had: screenshots from the forms, the letter from the attorney, Jeremiah's business card, which listed some suspicious credentials in tiny print on the back. Kyle listened, took notes, and said, "I've heard rumors about this guy. If you can introduce me to anyone else who's been scammed by him, I can try to put together a story." That set me on a quest to find other victims. Through social media, I discovered two people, Margaret and Fred, both older. Both had lost big chunks of money to Jeremiah. They told me how he'd convinced them their adult son was infected by a demonic spirit and that they needed to pay for repeated exorcisms to keep the darkness away. Eventually, he bled them dry and moved on. Their story was eerily similar to mine, right down to the part where he told them to cut ties with their son. I gave Kyle their contact info, and he started building the case. Meanwhile, I was still stuck worrying about my mom, who seemed more indoctrinated every day. I was terrified that if I didn't do something drastic, she'd end up penniless and alone. I thought about forcibly checking her into some kind of mental health facility. But as an adult with no official diagnosis, she couldn't be admitted against her will. Then, last Tuesday, everything came to a head. Kyle managed to track down Jeremiah's real name, Timothy Evans, and found he had a history of fraud charges in another state. The only reason he wasn't behind bars was that none of the charges stuck, likely because he convinced his victims not to testify, or they were too embarrassed to come forward. Kyle confronted him in a parking lot after one of his public seminars, camera rolling. Jeremiah fled the scene, but Kyle was able to get enough footage to run a piece on the local news about the alleged scam. Of course, that alone wasn't necessarily going to free my mother from his clutches, but it was a start. I raced over to Mom's house with a flash drive containing the news segment, determined to show her the truth. She actually let me in this time, maybe because Jeremiah was busy hiding out. When I showed her the footage, she just went pale. She played it 3 times, taking in every detail. I saw tears slip down her cheeks as the anchor mentioned Margaret and Fred and other anonymous victims who'd lost their savings to Jeremiah's manipulations. I expected her to collapse in my arms, apologizing for everything, but instead, she stared at me with this stricken look and whispered, "What have I done?" I tried to comfort her, but she recoiled, almost afraid to touch me. "I've been so cruel to you," she whispered. "Linda, it's okay," I said, too emotional to realize I was using her first name for the first time in forever. "We can still fix this. It's going to be fine. I just need you to see that you're not cursed and I'm not cursed and this man is a fraud." She sat there, silent, tears running down her face. For a second, I thought I'd finally gotten through to her. But then she murmured, "Jeremiah told me if I betray him, the curse will consume both of us. Maybe it's not him who's the fraud. Maybe the news is lying. I don't know who to believe anymore." It was heartbreaking to see how torn she was. I remember kneeling in front of her, taking her hands in mine, saying, "Mom, you know me. If there's one person on this earth you can trust, it's your daughter. Please believe me." She looked at me for a long moment, and then, as if the spell finally cracked, she broke down. She clutched my hands and sobbed until we both were shaking. We spent the night together, just talking. She cried over how foolish she felt, how lonely she'd been after she retired, how she'd started to feel useless and irrelevant. Jeremiah had preyed on that insecurity, telling her she was special, chosen, with a grand spiritual purpose, and that I was the only obstacle. She'd wanted to believe so badly that she was still important to someone. It made me furious at him, but also deeply sad for her. I made her promise to cut off contact with Jeremiah. She said she would, but she was petrified of what he might do. "He'll come after me," she kept saying. I insisted we'd get a restraining order if needed. The next day, while I was helping her clean out some of his so-called spiritual tools, he actually showed up. I'd never seen my mom so scared in my life. He burst into the house, ignoring my shouts to leave, and started yelling at her for betraying him. I gave you everything, Linda. A new purpose, a new sense of self, and you repay me like this? She was trembling, hiding behind me. It took all my self-control not to lose my mind at him. I told him to get out or I'd call the cops. He laughed, this eerie, hollow sound. You don't realize what forces you're dealing with, he hissed, stepping closer. I've seen the darkness in your daughter. It will destroy you both. Not before I could retort, my mom yelled, Timothy! He froze for a second, clearly startled that she used his real name. She held up the flash drive with the news piece. I know who you are, she said. I saw what you did to those people. Get out of my house, and don't ever come back. I half expected him to attack us, but he just glared, grabbed the remainder of his junk, and stormed out. I collapsed onto the couch in relief. That night, we changed her locks, and I helped her block his number on her phone. She called her attorney first thing in the morning, explaining that she was rescinding her new will and that she'd been manipulated into disinheriting me. Mr. Thompson told her he was glad to hear she was returning to her senses, but it's not like flipping a switch. Mom is still very shaken, and she's dealing with the guilt of having pushed me away. She keeps apologizing for calling me cursed, for believing Jeremiah's nonsense. I told her, it's going to take time for both of us to move past this, but I'm here. And I meant it. Legally, we might still have a fight on our hands if Jeremiah tries to sue for defamation or some nonsense, but Kyle says there's little chance of that. Once con artists get exposed, they tend to run for new territory. Mom also discovered a couple of suspicious withdrawals from her accounts. She's filing a fraud report, though it's unclear if she'll get any of that money back. I'm just grateful I haven't lost her entirely. For a while, I thought I had. We're taking baby steps. I spent a couple of nights at her place just to keep her company in case Jeremiah tried to come back. We made dinner together. Pasta, nothing fancy. We chatted about normal stuff like the neighbor's new dog, or the latest Netflix show she's been binge-watching. It's surreal because the memory of her calling me cursed is still fresh. Every now and then, she'll go quiet, and I can see shame wash over her face. I try to reassure her that we all make mistakes, that she was vulnerable and Jeremiah took advantage, but I can't pretend it didn't hurt. There's a bruise on our relationship that might never fully fade. As for the will, I've told her multiple times that I don't care about the money. I truly don't. I care about her. She insists she's putting me back in, not because I need her assets, but because, she says, it's the right thing to do, and I won't let that creep's influence keep controlling my decisions. I also suggested she might want to see a counselor, and she agreed it might help. She's still a little defensive about the idea that she could be brainwashed, but I think she's warming to the thought that she needs some outside support. Looking back, I never imagined something like this could happen to us. It's the kind of tale you read about in tabloids or maybe see in a melodramatic TV show. Someone gets sucked into a cult or a scam and suddenly believes their child is an instrument of evil. But it happened. I lived it. And it taught me how vulnerable we all can be, especially when we're lonely or searching for meaning. Jeremiah offered my mom a sense of belonging, a sense of power, and exploited her fears about losing me, ironically, pushing her to drive me away in the process. I hate him for what he did, but I also hate the fact that there's a whole industry out there of people like him, preying on folks who just want some guidance or companionship. If there's one silver lining, it's that the crisis forced Mom and me to face some buried issues. We'd never really talked about her retirement fears, or how she felt about getting older and living alone. We'd never addressed how Dad's abandonment years ago still left her feeling unworthy of love. It's messy, it's painful, but at least now it's all out there. We can try to heal, together. I'm not sure what the future holds. I still get paranoid that Jeremiah, or Timothy, whatever his real name is, might show up again. I've changed my own locks too, but I'm hopeful that the worst is behind us. Mom's attorney is redoing the will, and we're taking steps to prevent Jeremiah from contacting her. She's promised to tell me right away if he tries to call or send someone else to her door. Sometimes, late at night, I still lie awake replaying everything in my head. The day I discovered the letter from the lawyer, the moment she told me to my face that money would feed my curse, the way Jeremiah stared me down like I was an actual monster. I wonder how many families like mine are quietly going through the same ordeal. It breaks my heart. But I can't save the entire world. I can only try to save my mom, and, by extension, myself. So, that's my story. It's still unfolding, I guess. But I wanted to get it off my chest, especially since so many people think stuff like this can't happen to them. Trust me, it can. All it takes is the wrong person whispering in your ear at your lowest moment. If anyone reading this has a family member caught in a similar situation, please don't give up. It might feel hopeless, but sometimes all it takes is one piece of evidence or one show of unwavering love to snap them out of it. Mom's not out of the woods yet. She's got a long road ahead to rebuild her confidence and recover from the financial loss. But at least she's not calling me cursed anymore, and that's something. I'm grateful I caught wind of the will changes before it was too late. Yeah, being disinherited sucks in principle, but the real pain came from knowing my own mother believed I was essentially evil. Now, at least, we're talking again. She even hugged me yesterday. A long, tearful hug that said more than words ever could. That's worth more than any inheritance could be. And maybe that's what unconditional love is supposed to look like. Fighting through the darkest of doubts and fears, and coming out the other side still holding on to each other. If you take anything from my story, take this. Be vigilant about the people who waltz into your loved ones' lives claiming they can solve all their problems, especially if money is changing hands and the person demands isolation from friends or family. It might start small, harmless-sounding talk about energies or auras, but if you see it escalating, don't ignore the signs. Fight for your loved one if you can. They might just need someone to show them the light. In my case, I almost lost my mother to a spiritual scam, but at least she's back now and we're slowly piecing things together, one step at a time.